Shanda actually showed up for her sentencing, and the judge showed zero mercy, which was totally appropriate. And we're going to talk about it in today's video. Hello, Sofa Squad, and welcome back to the sofa. Sofa's back there. Roscoe's on it. My name's Paul. I'm sitting in front of it. Today we're going to be talking about an awful case that has gone through the court systems recently. It ended up at the end of the last year, and the perpetrator in this, Shanda, Vander was found guilty. Now, fast forward, the sentencing just happened, and it was very emotional. In fact, you might go ahead and just get your little fan out for tears, because it's one of those. So what we're going to do in this video is we are going to talk about what was said at the sentencing, and we're going to look at some clips to examine and talk about that and that kind of a thing. That's how this will go. Now, before we do jump into it, if you want to follow Roscoe and myself at the Instagrams, it's on the little TV screen you're watching. It's in the description. Go on, click it. We do little Instagrammy things over there, whatever that means. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so like I said, this is in reference to the case of Shanda Vander. She was recently found guilty of things that she had done, crimes against her son, Timothy. Now, her other son, Paul, was also involved in this. However, he did strike a plea deal for a lesser sentence and to testify against his mother. And so that took place. Now, one of the things to keep in mind is that Shanda never showed up to the day that they sentenced, or I'm sorry, the guilty verdict day, whatever you call it. She claimed something was going on and couldn't make it, but I mean, come on, right? She actually took the stand for whatever reason. It did not help her. So what we're watching today is the sentencing, and we're going to hear from her two other children and specifically pay attention to their victim impact statements and what they had to say. So that's kind of like just a 60-second quick overview of how we arrived at this video. Let's go ahead and start talking about some of those impact statements. So one of Timothy's older sisters spoke at the sentencing, gave her victim impact statement, and she described life with Timothy and was basically like, we were always the two smallest, the two this, the two that, we were always together. And very impactful, on at least for me, is that she said that one of her earliest memories was being taken away from her parents by CPS, and that her and Timothy rode in the same car. It was absolutely heartbreaking to hear the words that she said, and for such a young person in general, whatever, to get up there and so eloquently describe their feelings about the situation. My hat goes off to them. Now, one of the things she also said was, I'm not filled with regret about most things in life, but this right here, she was like, I'm filled with so much regret for not hugging him more, for could I have been there, all of these things. And in these cases that we watch, and especially when we hear from other victims and whatnot, this is where you see that the crimes don't just affect those who might have lost their lives or immediately involved in the actual thing, but it expands out. There's so many different levels of victimization of people that happens with these that is absolutely devastating. And let me tell y'all what, there probably was not a dry eye in this court listening to her brother, and other people speak. In fact, let's go ahead and look at one of the first clips of her talking.
It took me 6 months of therapy after to even properly feel the emotions of his death.
Now, she went on to say that, she really wanted to make it a point for people to know that he was loved. There are people grieving for him who dearly loved him. And she said that she was there to speak for him because obviously he was unable to be there to talk.
I want the woman who killed my little brother to face the highest punishment possible. I want her detained for the rest of her life so she can't hurt anyone else. And I want the world to know that Timothy was wanted. If not by her, then by me.
I can only hope that I would make such an impact on somebody during my time here on this earth that they would speak of me in the way that she spoke of her brother. I mean, it gives me goosebumps. Literally just tears your heart out. Now, let's go ahead and move on over to his brother, Timothy's brother, and hear what he had to say.
I am Timothy's oldest brother, and unfortunately the oldest child of Shanda Vander.
Wow, unfortunately, the older son of her. Major. Now, he would speak of getting the phone call of, this has happened to Timothy, and then days later getting the phone call of, and now your mom is in jail for what happened to him. Now, also very interesting is he would go on to say, I thought that things had changed. I thought that Shanda had changed for the better. I found that very interesting. You can tell this pattern has gone on for years in years. He would go on to say that he struggled with his career, his personal life, ever since this tragedy has happened, constantly raking over his mind, could I have done something more? Should I have done this? And another thing that he said that was so impactful and just, tears your heart out is he said, all Timothy knew was to love. He was just so full of love. And that even probably up to his very last minutes, he was still going to love the woman responsible for doing these things to him, his mother, Shanda. However, Nolan did say, this is not a quality that I had as well. He had certain ways that he felt about his mother.
So now I turn to the justice system in hopes that in addition to serving the maximum penalty, that there will be no appeals or second chances. If I can't have my brother back, she shouldn't have her freedom back.
Now, the judge would remind everybody that, hey, look, remember that there is a mandatory sentence that will go along with one of these charges, which is life without parole, as it should be. However, when we do get here to sentencing in just a moment, we'll see where the judge was able to go outside some guidelines and really make an impactful sentence for these monstrous acts.
And it is a sentence which is as warranted in this case as ever there was a case.
Now, that was the state speaking, and they would say that they stood up there at the stand during the victim impact statements to show that, we're with you, we support you, we're here for Timothy, we're here for his memory, we're here for what has been done to the family as a whole. And another thing they would bring up was Shanda's demeanor while her children, Timothy's siblings, were up there speaking.
But I also wanted to see Ms. Vander. She didn't look over at her kids once. Not once during this entire process did she look over at her children. And that speaks volumes.
She was completely removed from this entire situation. Remember, when they announced the verdict, she didn't even show up that day, right? She was done, I don't even want to be here. She came up with some lame excuse or whatever. But notice in the clip that we just watched, while she's sitting there, and once the guy's the state was she didn't even look at her kids. She didn't look at her kids. She turns to her attorney and says something. I'm sure she had an excuse as to why she wasn't looking or whatever, But it's just that quick head turn like that she does it. I'm just there's nothing to say. I mean, it's true. There's such a removal of accountability and of any kind of attachment to her children. I don't even know if she looks at them as children. I understand, and at least I would hope that part of not looking at them is a hold your head in shame kind of a thing, but I don't know if she's capable of feeling shame.
All of the things that she did, or all of the things that she withheld, or all of the things that she directed her other son to do are so callous and so cold that they just defy explanation.
The state would say the only thing they could really come up with was that maybe she stopped looking at them as actual children, but more like objects. And they would say and ask the court, give her the most ultimate punishment that you can give her, of what you're able to do, throw the book at her, throw her under the jail, and lock away the key. Now, on the contrary, the defense, which he's just doing his job, I get it, he tries to humanize her. He tries to give context to the actions, even though we could argue there's no context needed for these actions, right? The state would talk about things that have happened to her throughout her life, such as things at the hands of her father and people like that, and stepfather, not good things, but how these could have contributed to her state of mind when she did these, crimes. He talks about her mental health, and then he talks about her academic success, the fact that she took care of her husband and took care of the kids.
She goes on and she provides a home for her 3 children and her ailing husband while going to school full time, while being a mother full time, while working full time. She does all these things. But she makes a mistake. She makes one decision she shouldn't have made. She says yes.
I mean, you want to talk about can't roll my eyes hard enough? I mean, this was ballsy, okay, for him to say. This is ballsy, right? I mean, when he's saying that, I'm provided a home and whatnot for the kid. Are you kidding me? It was we see the things that happened in there, okay? Not a cute look. Now, he'll talk about other things she raised dogs, and I would argue she probably treated the dogs better than the kids, but then he'll round this back out to the decision to take Timothy in. The decision of saying yes to that instead of no, and how this would not basically be the situation it is if she had just said no in the beginning and he had gone to foster care and gone to a family or whatever. But he goes on to say, she did what moms do and she took him in, even though she knew it would be this uphill battle because she didn't have legal custody. And while I understand I mean, if you follow these cases, you know how it ends with foster care a lot of the times, right? I get it, okay? Not trying to deny that, but nonetheless, I don't think it would have taken that much for her to arrive here. I think there was some form of pleasure out of this that she got of controlling and doing the things that she did to him, right? I don't think it was just a stressful thing and, oh, she should have said no and, she had too much on her plate. I'm like, I think this is who she is. I think this lies beneath the surface.
She and Paul are unaware of the damage. They don't see it. How could you not see it? Because something's broken.
You can say that again. Okay, something's definitely broken. But now here's my question on that. If something's broken, if something's so damaged or whatever, why did she lie so much? Why did she know to cover up? Why did she lie at every step of the way to try and hide these actions if it was coming from a broken place? Now, ultimately, the defense will ask the judge to go basically the guidelines. Let's not go above it. Let's not go beneath it. Let's just give us the guidelines. Now, the judge would speak and he would bring up the fact that, the defense is bringing up a lot of the same stuff that we heard during trial. And the judge will say, when this concluded, I sat in my car and I was thinking, what could have caused this? Like, I almost believe this thing of she had this hard life, this happened to her, that, it's this whole gathering of these issues that took place to bring her to where she was at committing these crimes. But he said, I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I look at her actions and the negligence. And then he had to say this about the realization that he came to.
Why I could feel that way. And what I realized is that I wanted to feel that way because I didn't want to accept the reality of the situation here. And the reality of the situation here is that this person, Ms. Vander, you intentionally engaged in these acts.
Amen, brother. Now, oftentimes during these cases, you'll hear me say, if you followed me, I'm always trying to assign a reason to the unreasonable, organize the unorganizable, right? Because in my mind, I'm like that, where I'm like, I don't want to think that this just would happen or that somebody just would do this, because especially in this right here, where you don't want to think that a mother would do this for no other reason than just being evil, right? However, sadly, on my time here at the sofa, I've learned, unfortunately, that pure evil really does exist. But the judge goes on to say that he doesn't think her end goal in this was like to unalive Timothy, right? In fact, he'll allude to the fact that what he thinks her ultimate intentions were far more sinister and evil and plotting than that.
I don't believe there was an intent to kill here because you would have lost the very thing that you wanted to.
Now, the judge will go on to say that without Timothy, she would have only had the younger children to inflict her wrath on, and that she was probably going to do this situation for as long as she could get away with it. Now, he'll say that he read all 2,000 text messages or 2,000 pages or something crazy number of text messages in this case, and that he read all this and was like, you knew exactly what you were doing. You lied the second the police got there for that interview. If you've watched the body cam footage of that release video, it is super cringy, okay? It's what we know now, and seeing that and what she's coming up with, pure evil does exist, sadly. Now, another very impactful thing that he says is he brings up his love for his own children, as a father and that type thing. And he'll say, but even then, so when I look at like my wife's and a motherly love, it can often be this love that is so huge and grand and that type of thing. But obviously it is not the case with her at all.
To see what you did to your own child. I don't know if there's a word in the English language to describe how to describe it. I only can come up with just horrific.
Now, he'll list off all the stuff that she did to Timothy that came up in the trial, as well as other things that did not come up in the trial, like her intention to blindfold him, as well as give him salt water as another form of punishment. Now, the judge will also say, I didn't want the pictures of him, Timothy, to be shown because I don't want the memory of him to be that in people's minds of the state that he was in when he was found.
But of all the things you took away from him, one thing I didn't want you to take away from him was at least some shred of dignity.
Amen. I mean, that part right there is so beautiful. I absolutely love this judge, the things that he had to say. Such a powerful move. Now, he will take an earlier photo of Timothy and put it on the bench facing her, and he'll even say, you wouldn't even look at this photo. I mean, it breaks my heart. Oh my God, my hair on my arm is standing up because you're just like, I mean, come on. And then they show the photo and you see just this innocent child and you think of what he went through. And the fact that they have to show a photo from years before because it was so bad off, the way that he looked. How? How is this possible?
And you can't even look at him. That's how he was. A beautiful child with a lot of life in his eyes.
And that's the part that I'm talking about that's just heart-wrenching. And again, you hear him say, can't even look at him, you know? And I'm sure she's sitting over there talking about, I can because of this or that. But it begs the question, then how did you do this in the act? I don't understand that part where she wants to act like she has all this, needs this special attention because of this and that and the other. But yet she was able to inflict this on him, but all of a sudden now it bothers her. No. Now he will go on to say, though, you know what? Timothy won because he exposed you for what you were and what you did to him. He was able to bring this out to light. And with that, he imposes sentence.
First, as to count 2, child in the first degree. Court sentences you 50 years to 100 years in prison.
Now, the judge will note that in this, he has gone over the guidelines because of the situation of this case. So I was like, aim in. You know, good on him for any chance that she might have gotten out of the other life charges or whatever we're about to get to. At least that's there. And it's such an impact to show the horrible nature of her actions.
Felony murder. It's a sentence of the court that you serve a term within the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of your natural life without parole.
Amen. We absolutely love every bit of that. Where she should be, with everybody knowing what she's capable of and what she's done. You know, it's so interesting watching this take place and seeing outside their window the snow coming down. Something so peaceful outside, such a nightmare unfolding in here. Now, in other clips and whatnot, you can see people at the state table crying. I mean, I gotta catch my breath a little bit. It really gets to you when you watch it and listen to the full, speech. If you want to see the whole thing, it's on court TV. This was just one of those cases. It really got to me, and not many do. And I shouldn't say that like in the way of like, oh, it's just a breeze. But they all get to you. But some of them hit much differently and harder. And I think part of it for me was seeing her up there taking the stand, no accountability, blaming her other child, and you could just see her soul had left the building years ago, right? There was nothing there. You can only imagine if this was like a cleaned up version of her, meaning, she's trying to keep it together to get out of trouble. Imagine what they saw at home behind closed doors where that monster was free to reign. And I feel like that's what it was. And she's roped her other kid, Paul, into it. She roped everyone. You hear the children, the siblings getting up there. It's absolutely horrible. So I really love the judge. I love the sentence, and I love that he made an impactful statement with that 50 to 100 years. And I think she's right where she belongs. I think she would have continued to do this. Like he said, I don't think her end goal was to unalive Timothy. It was to literally take out all of her unhappiness on another person. So that's it. I appreciate you watching. If you're still watching, well, I'd say thank you. And Roscoe, I see you drop some sofas down in the comment section for him. And until Roscoe and I do meander on down to that comment section to hang out and talk, we'll see y'all soon.